we stimulate the ability to look for that. So the question helps to find the context and the content, but it also begins to pattern the space. So that's facilitators. Patterning the space. What do I mean by that? Once I know about something, I begin to see it everywhere. If I'm not focused on it, I don't see it. So here's an example. If I want to buy a new pair of shoes, suddenly I begin to notice everybody's shoes. I really noticed Maria's shoes because she had on these red sandals. She came there from Denmark with bows on them. I noticed those shoes. Did you notice anybody? So the moment I want new shoes, I begin noticing shoes. But the day before, they weren't in my. You really know that if you buy a new car, suddenly you'll notice, hey, there's a lot of these cars on the road. Where did they come from? Or if someone's pregnant, suddenly everybody's pregnant. That's because suddenly you've patterned the space to be able to see things. So if you start asking questions to elicit stories, next week we want to hear some examples of where we've been actually able to work really well in collaboration. Could you just think about this in the meantime? You're already patterning the space for people to find the stories. They will already begin coming because the brain is already activated to look for them. So that's an interesting thing. You can begin eliciting a story before anybody ever gets in the room by asking them to think about something. And then when they're in a trio, they can work on, so you notice the three roles in our trio was storyteller, harvester, and witness, or listener. So that might be the question. Maybe you want somebody to listen for this and somebody to listen for that. So what are you going to pull out of the story? What is the purpose for telling this story? It's really good to be clear about that. So as you're planning, why do I want people to share stories? Maybe I want them, they've been antagonists. This one is somebody who likes forestry and wants to cut down the trees, and this one is the one who wants to save the trees, and this one is the one who, I don't know. So could I ask them to tell stories about why they love the forest? Because each of them love that in a certain way. And could we understand each other better if we all heard each other's take on it? Coming from the place of what we have in common, we all love the forest. And then moving into, okay, we want to use it differently. How do we work well together in that regard? So the question of ethics is a really interesting one, and if you want to have a deep discussion about that, I'm trying to think of what Simone's last name is, but there used to be a guy who worked for the city of Stockholm, who worked with youth storytelling, and they had a very strong ethics policy about how do they protect young people. So when they did digital storytelling, the young person never showed up on the camera. The story always belonged to the young person, and they made all of the clients sign off that that was the case. So a very strong policy, and that would be interesting to look at.
Barnombudsmannen jobbar mycket med storytelling.
So
Digital storytelling.
Yeah. So he would be a good person for you to talk to. Very strong. So let me just say something about appreciative inquiry really quickly. So appreciative inquiry these two words, what we appreciate grows in value. To appreciate means to grow in value. So if you owned a Van Gogh painting right around the time he was alive, it would have been worth
Who?
Van Gogh.
Ah.
If you owned a Van Gogh right now, or Van Gogh, I suppose you're saying Dutch, it would be worth, it has appreciated, meaning it's risen in value. So the things we value keep rising in value. So this is about what can we find that we could appreciate or value, and how could that help us see things that we could value more. The word inquiry is about if I start to ask questions about something that takes me on a journey. So I need to be aware of what question I'm asking. I could ask what's wrong about this stuff, or I could ask what's working around here. Both of those questions will take me in a different direction. So if it's about there's bullying in the workplace, I might be wanting to inquire into where have men and women or people worked well together before, and what can we find out about how to do more of that, rather than studying bullying. So if I study bullying, I'll learn a lot about it, who does it, how it happens, all that stuff. But I may not learn anything about what do I do that's different. So that inquiry, the stories you start to elicit make a big difference. So it has a number of phases. First of all, you got to decide what is it you're going to focus on. So in the merger process I was involved in, we decided not to call it a merger because nobody wants to be in one of those. We decided to call it Best Plus Best. We would like the best of this organization to join the best of that organization. That sounds like a very different thing. Then we got together a team, an advisory team of people from across the system. I was putting together a group that would be 1,300 people, 1,300, and that was 600 in one group and 700 in others. So we had, I think, 27 in total out of both of 11, 12, 13 people out of each of the groups, geographically spread and with every other kind of diversity. Gender, race, ethnicity, seniority. They worked on what should we be inquiring about, and they decided that if this business would become the top of its game, we would like to hear some stories about passionate people, people who really cared about their jobs and what they were doing. We would like to have some stories about raving fans, so clients that were so pleased with what we were doing that they went out and marketed us to everybody else. And we like to have some stories about irresistible leadership. That's what they called it, which sounds cool. I want to have some of that. So the first phase of appreciative inquiry is called, this is the 4D cycle, it's called discovery. In this phase, you want to discover where those attributes that you want to have happening in your system are already alive. So we went out across the system and we asked people to share stories about passionate people, raving fans, and irresistible leadership. And we heard amazing stories about these different things. So we were discovering the strength of the system. That creates what's called an appreciative inquiry, the positive core, where we are at our best, or who we are at our best, and how that happens. Out of that, you go into the second phase, which is called the dream phase. Okay, we've already found out some places where we are really good, maybe only for 5 minutes, but hey, that's great. How do we be that even more? What's our dream that could come out of this? So what's better than that? So it's almost like, what's good? What's better than that? So some people got together, 213 people got together in a summit. They came together for 3 days and worked on the internal vision statement, looking at sharing stories with each other and the stories that had been collected to really see what the positive core is, to dream what could be the next phase of it, and to figure out if we wanted to do this, what would we need to do. So that's called design. If I want to have my dream come true, then what kind of stretch targets would we have to put in place? Where would we have to shift the system? What would we need to work on in order for that to be true, in order for us to be more of who we are at our best? So they made some targets and people signed up to them, and then 17 projects came out of that. So this is then deliver. So what needs to go into action in order to reach the stretch targets we set, in order to be the dream we are, to be more of who we are at our best? So this is an iterative process. It kind of can keep going around like that. So the power of story connects people to where it already works. And usually what happens is if I'm talking to you and we share a story about something that works, we get excited and we think, where else could that work? And we start going off and doing stuff. Lots of times we don't even ask permission. We just start doing it. Hey. So you can use this process, and you can use storytelling strategically to connect people across things that never have been connected before. In this structure, that's called the power of the improbable pair. In other words, if you put two people together who think they're very different from each other and they discover something they have in common, suddenly you have more power in the system because it's connected in a different way. So when you're thinking about storytelling, so I'm just thinking about your youth storytelling, who would need to be involved in a storytelling to be the acupressure point that shifts the system? That's an interesting question. Strategically, who would need to be involved in something and talking to each other and sharing stories in order for things to shift? So an example on this that comes out of an initiative called Imagine Chicago. In Chicago, they took a whole set of youth at risk. These were kids who looked like they might be picked up in what they call the school to prison pipeline. It's young people of color in the U.S. that mostly get sucked in right from school and go into university, which is prison, in order to learn how to be better. So they took these young people at risk, and they asked them to be the interviewers of the leading lights in Chicago, the people in society who had some ideas about where the future was going. So the young people were the interviewers, and they talked to these people who had the dream of the future. And what happened was really interesting. the people who had the dream for the future got excited talking to these young people, and some of them began to be so interested in the young people that they did things like paid for their college education. So suddenly the improbable pair is working. So across this diversity, something is alive. That's why I think this is quite powerful. So we did this merger process was designed to help people step into something they were afraid of. Going into a merger is not any fun for most people. So how do you help people step in with the curiosity about who the other people are and the desire to step in at a higher level and be positive about what might be possible? So we were using story to leverage that system. So we've answered ethics, we answered the Christian inquiry. Have you got enough for, you don't have a story? Yeah. Did somebody?
I was thinking about, I think, can I ask you, in work sometimes on, when we have coffee breaks and so on, there's always the same people telling a lot of stories and you don't want to listen to them. They're talking about their own lives and remember, like you said, I remember my grandmother did that and that, and that becomes a very long story and it's very boring.
So could you create a story prompt, some questions that could be there in the coffee place in order for people to hear different stuff from each other?
Yeah, how do you mean? Because I go away from coffee breaks.
So you could make a number of questions. It's sitting right there in the coffee place, and you go, hey, look, I'm interested in this. Can I ask you a question? And then you ask them the question, see what happens.
Yeah, they start talking.
No, but you ask them this question.
Yeah.
So you're asking them a different question.
I choose the questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you heard about the deck of cards called More Than One Story? Have you heard about this? It's